Hello and welcome to this video tutorial on how to make charges, enter receipts, and view tenant account information. I'm going to show you how to charge rent for an entire property and just for individual tenants. I'm also going to show you how to enter receipts, or some would say post rent, and then view tenant account histories. We will also go over how to undo incorrect postings and charges. First, let's charge rent. Click on the sidebar group Management Actions and select the icon Charge Rents. Enter the period using the format month and full year. You will then enter the date rent is due. If you are an administrator, you will see divisions and have the option of charging rent to an entire division, whether it be multifamily or commercial. This saves time in having to select one property at a time. If you are a property manager, you will only see sites that you manage. Select the site from the drop-down list. You will have to do each site one at a time. After selecting the site or division, click the button Charge Rent. Rent will be charged to each unit based on the lease information for each unit. If, as an administrator, you selected multifamily, this may take several minutes to charge rent for each property. You can view the log file if you like. The log file displays the total amount of rent charged to the property. This does not include subsidy. Rent is now charged for the month. Now it's time to post rent collected. In Tenants I Part I video, you learned how to get focus on a tenant and right-click. We're going to use the same feature to enter receipts for tenants. In the Tenants I Part I video, you also learned how to locate your tenant using 3 different methods. You can locate your tenant by their last name, using the unit ID, or by using the units grid and locating the unit. Whichever method you choose is up to the user. I am going to use the units grid to locate the tenant. I am first going to get focus on the site, and then get focus on the unit. Once I locate my tenant, I simply right-click and select Enter Receipt. To the right is some tenant information, which is important to view. Here is where you can catch errors, making sure you have focus on the right tenant. Viewing the current balance and tenant contribution. Once you've verified all the information, you will enter the payment. In our example, our tenant has a current balance of 0 because their tenant contribution is 0. In this case, our tenant will have a prepaid balance of $125. You'll notice the tenant receipt does not close once you save the form. At the bottom of the form, you have the option of adding additional receipts. If you click Add, you will need to add another unit number and you can continue entering receipts. Not just for the previous tenant that you just applied a payment for, but for other tenants as well. This is especially helpful at the beginning of the month when the majority of the monthly payments are received. We are now adding a receipt or collecting a payment for another tenant. Prior to saving this form, if you notice at the very bottom of the form, there's an option to print the receipt. If there's a check mark in the box, each time that you save this form, a receipt will print for your tenant. If you do not want a receipt to print, simply uncheck the box. When you are finished, close the form. When you close the tenant receipt form, the account history of the tenant in focus is automatically displayed. This takes us to viewing account histories. The account history will either show a charge or a receipt, and a description of both. Pretty simple. Now, let's clear the screen to show how to get back to this point. You simply get focus on the tenant, and you'll find the tenant in either way that you are used to doing. Right-click and select Account History Grid. Now, let's right-click again and select SD Transaction. This is how you will enter a security deposit. The form is similar to the tenant receipt form, but with less information. Simply enter the payment information. The SD type that you select will normally either be a pet deposit or a security deposit at the very bottom of your options. Before we save the form, let me explain the terms SD balance and Tenant SD. SD balance is the amount of security deposit the tenant has paid. In this example, our tenant has already paid a balance of $26. Tenant SD is the amount they are required to pay. When you enter an SD transaction, you will know what the tenant has paid and what he or she is required to pay. You enter what's required when the tenant moves in. You also have the option of printing a receipt. Now let's save the security deposit transaction. Just like when entering a tenant receipt, after entering an SD transaction, the SD account history is displayed. Now, how do we view the security deposit account history? Let's clear our screen and show you how to get back to this point. Again, the first thing we do is get focused on our tenant. Right-click, and we're going to select SD History. Since we have focus on our tenant, let's just continue with our right-click menu. Let's right-click and select Enter Charge. This is going to allow us to enter individual charges to tenants. You will select the charge code, enter the amount of the charge, either keep the default description or change it if you like, and save the form. Before you save, you can place a check mark in the Print Receipt box, and a receipt will print each time you save the charge form. Just like with tenant receipts, you can continue adding charges just by clicking Add, and when you close the form, the account history is displayed. We just made an individual charge to a tenant. Now, let's charge an entire property for late charges. Click on the sidebar group Management Actions and select the icon Charge Late Fees. The form is the same form as what is used when rent is charged. You will complete the form the same way, entering the period first, and then the date late fees are charged. Select your division if you are an administrator, or your property if you are a site manager, and select the Charge Late Fees button at the bottom of the form. You will be able to print late notices automatically after charging late fees. If you choose not to print late notices, simply select No. Just like when charging rent, you have the option of viewing a log file when charging late fees. Late charges have been charged for the entire property, and now you may exit form. Now, sometimes receipts and charges are posted to incorrect accounts or the wrong amount is applied. Let's talk about how to undo those. Of course, the first thing you will have to do is get focused on the tenant After getting focused, right-click and go to the Account History grid. You will need to get focused on the charge or receipt you want to undo. In this case, we want to undo the damages of $20 for this tenant. So I'm going to get focused on those damages. Next, select the sidebar group Tenant Actions and the icon Undo C/R, which means undo charge or receipt. In order to use this feature, the transactions you are undoing must be in the same period you are currently in. Select the icon and the undo was successful. Thank you for taking time to watch this video tutorial.